Yeah, so when it comes to international politics, many people don't understand that each country has its own interest, right? And each country has its own security interest. So I'm referring to the war in Ukraine at the moment. So just like the United States has its own security interest on its own Western hemisphere, Russia also have its own security interest. So many people actually think that countries have rights, just like people within a country have rights. You have rights because there is a government that basically grant you these rights and it protects these rights. Okay, but when it comes to the relationship between countries, there's no such thing as rights for countries. A country has options to decide what they want to do, but there are certain decisions that a country can make that it won't help them in the long run. So, for example, there are experts or analysts that believe that the decision made by Ukraine to try or intend to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was wrong because for many years Russia has advised and has warned the West that if Ukraine enter NATO, Russia won't allow it. They will basically destroy Ukraine completely because they see that as a threat to the security interests. If NATO gets closer to Russia, sees that as a concern. And the question is, what is the reason why does NATO wants to get closer and closer to Russia? So did you know that back in the 1990s, the Soviet Union wanted to be part of NATO? So Mikhail Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader, and the Russian Federation's first president Boris Yeltsin as well, they both lobbied for the Soviet Union to enter the alliance. And in the year 2000, even Putin wanted Russia to be part of the alliance. But the West rejected this request. So, why the request was rejected? Some experts said that if that has happened, so if Russia or the Soviet Union entered NATO, the current Russian onslaught on Ukraine could have been completely prevented. So let's listen to Michael Hudson to try to understand why the West did not want Russia to join NATO and what is the interest of countries when it comes to the security concerns.
Is the identical strategy thought up by Mr. Brzezinski 25 years ago in Afghanistan. Brzezinski was the strategist for Jimmy Carter and convinced Jimmy Carter to say, look, the Russians are dominating Afghanistan with a civilian secular government. Let's create a new organization. Let's create Al-Qaeda. Let's back Osama bin Laden and give his supporters weapons to begin fighting the Russians. And we can pull a coup d'etat there. And the Russians will fight back. And then we'll say the Russians invaded.
So do you listen to that strategy? You need to understand this properly because what he's saying is the Soviet Union, they have, he's calling them the Russians, but the Soviet Union, they have dominance over their own hemisphere, just like the United States have dominance over the Western hemisphere. And what the United States wanted is have control over that hemisphere as well. So what they wanted to do, or what they plan to do, is to basically create a civilian uprising that led to a coup d'etat in Afghanistan, and then blame the Russians for entering into the country and trying to prevent that coup d'etat from happening, or that civilian revolution from happening. So this is really important what he's saying, because he's actually mentioned that a country, an external power, engineer a scenario for something to happen in a country, forget another country to react towards what happened, and then blame them for doing something that then themselves have engineered. This is extremely important, and it's something that always come across when it comes to different international conflicts. And when you study international politics or international relations, you come across this quite a lot. Countries engineer certain things like popular revolts within a country just to get another country to react, or certain elements within that country to react, and then they will blame them for doing something that they themselves engineered. So let's continue listening.
And it worked. Saudi Arabia made a deal with America that they would push the Wahhabi extremists, the Al-Qaeda, the most right-wing wing of the Islamic parties, and it worked. Essentially, Al-Qaeda is a contract army for the United States. Well, the same thing was happening in Russia. What Brzezinski wrote was that America's faced with a possibility of not being able to rule the world unilaterally. And that would be a disaster for democracy. That we can't let any country's economic ability to be self-sufficient means potential military power. And in order to prevent any country from threatening America militarily, you have to prevent it from developing economically. The American nightmare, Brzezinski wrote, was that Russia would get together with Germany and with Western Europe, creating Russian raw materials, German industry, and somehow, finally, Russia would become westernized.
Hold on, isn't that what happened, basically? So as you might know, the German industry did flourish and did advance thanks to Russian raw materials. And we're talking about cheap Russian raw materials, specifically gas. And what happened after the Ukrainian war started is you have Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, both pipelines they blew up, okay? We don't actually know who did it. Some people actually know who did it, but they won't say who did it. And then what we have here is Europe and Russia cutting economic relations completely. And then we have the US coming to fill up this vacuum that was left by Russia and providing the European Union with gas and other raw materials, right? So who is winning? In this case is the United States winning. And just hear what he said. He said that United States wanted to continue being an hegemon, and in order to do that, they have to basically knock out all the adversaries, knock out all the countries that could challenge them in this respect.